This morning's talk is about talking. Is it ever common for meditators or spiritual seekers to reach a point where normal, mundane, everyday conversation feels hollow or even painful? Do you ever get to a point where all you want to talk about is God or the spiritual path? Do Eastern religions like Vedanta or Buddhism say anything about this? The answer is yes. Eastern spirituality does speak about this both directly and indirectly, and this morning I'm going to share with you some relevant ideas from different traditions. In Advaita Vedanta, Viveka is the discriminative wisdom between the real and the unreal, between the changing and unchanging. And as discrimination deepens, the mind wants to naturally withdraw from worldly topics and becomes more dispassionate. One with an intense longing for liberation or enlightenment often avoids worldly conversations not out of arrogance, but because it causes a kind of mental distraction or suffering. Shankara notes in the text called Viveka Chudamani that the seeker begins to avoid the company of worldly minded people because it begins to feel like talking with them is an obstacle to concentration. And in many yogic traditions, especially those focused on renunciation, there is the concept of fasting, but not just fasting from food, but fasting from distractions. And this includes avoiding useless or worldly speech. Such speech is seen as scattering the energy and just pulling the mind away from God or pulling the mind away from the innermost self. In early Buddhism, there's a concept of noble silence, which is silence kept by practitioners so they can see more deeply into the nature of reality, again, without distraction. For these individuals, the mundane type of just chattering away, it not only serves no purpose, but it feels almost unbearable because one can sense it's just perpetuating illusion, perpetuating suffering. Buddha himself often remained silent when people would make speculative debates or ask irrelevant questions. In Mahayana Buddhism, bodhisattvas might prefer deep contemplation or just listening to discourses on the Dharma, but many of the texts caution against becoming too reclusive because it can lead to detachment from compassion, lead to no compassion at all. That said, there are phases in the path of the bodhisattva where they do go into long retreats for years because normal human life and normal human conversation becomes too dense, almost karmically charged, negatively charged with negative karma. And they try not to engage with that for a while until they're more purified or more developed. In Dzogchen and in Kashmir Shaivism, there's a concept that after one tastes the natural state of self awareness, everything else can feel like a painful contraction. It's not aversion exactly. It's not aversion, it's actually a kind of sensitivity. The practitioner's awareness becomes so subtle that ordinary speech and behavior feels jarring, feels like a fall from grace. And on the bhakti path, the devotional path, like in Vaishnavism or Shaiva Bhakti, it is said that the devotee becomes so absorbed in love for God that talking of anything else other than Krishna or Shiva causes a feeling of separation and sorrow that results from that. There are well known saints like Mirabai and Sri Ramakrishna who exhibited this state where worldly talk or concern was painful to them. So, the next question is, what does this mean for us? If we're experiencing this, what should we do? The main thing to know is that if this is happening to you, or happens to you sometimes, you're not alone. You're not alone at all. This is a known stage on the path. You might be entering a deeper phase of inner silence. You might be just craving spiritual companionship with other people who are like you. And you might be experiencing what they call a drying up of worldly karma. Same old things just don't do it for you. But this stage can also lead to some important questions. Can you remain compassionate with those who are not on the same path? Can you integrate your silence without needing to shut others out? Can you find a spiritual depth, even in the ordinary? So sometimes this is a call to retreat. Other times it's a test of integration. Navigating this kind of shift where spiritual depth makes ordinary conversation feel pointless. It does require sensitivity, discernment, and compassion. So again, what can we do if this is happening to us? The first thing is to accept this without judgment. Recognize it as a natural development on the path. You're not becoming cold or elitist. You're simply tuning in to subtler frequencies. The craving for spiritual conversation and silence is a sign of maturity. It's a sign of inner transformation, not dysfunction. Second thing is to cultivate sangha. Be around others who value the same things you do. Be around others who value spiritual depth. This really helps. Even just one or two close companions that you can talk to about this kind of stuff, the Dharma, meditation, enlightenment. Even if you can just find one or two people to talk to and make friends with, it will really nourish you and your practice. So, if no spiritual community exists nearby, if you don't have a Dharma friend to talk with, consider starting a small group online or locally in your neighborhood. And you guys can read things to each other, meditate together, and talk about all of this. So, third is instead of avoiding small talk altogether, try and treat it like a compassion practice. Set the intention that you're not talking with people about normal things as a way for you to find your own stimulation, but practice it as a way to be fully present for others and to serve them where they are, wherever they are. Think of it as being in the world but not of it. Try just deeply listening to people and being fully present. You can anchor your awareness to your breath, and there's no need to like avoid or escape the moment. Practice being fully present and compassionate. The fourth thing would be if you're good at making jokes or telling stories, you can use metaphors or poetry or humor to help bridge the gap. Sometimes trying to talk to people about spiritual things goes over their head, or they don't know the lingo, and so whatever you're trying to say just doesn't land. It doesn't fit in their lap. It's like in one ear and out the other. But if you can use language that resonates with them, you can form a connection, even if it's not overtly spiritual. You can use a story or a movie reference to point to these same deeper truths without needing to teach them anything. Fifth is just to embrace silence more deliberately. If speech becomes painful, honor your desire for silence. Take daily or weekly vows of silence. Take short solo retreats, like even just for an afternoon, go off by yourself. Or just be more careful about taking time for yourself so that it just naturally cuts down on unnecessary communications. In this way, you're not being antisocial, you're just creating more space to deepen your center and make time for what you need, which is sometimes just quiet. Another thing is to try to integrate the quote non spiritual into the sacred rather than categorizing some conversations as spiritual and other conversations as not spiritual. Try seeing everything as sacred, like washing the dishes, sweeping the porch, or talking to somebody about their day. All of it can be spiritual if you're in the right mood. So try this mindset shift. If you're not quite in the mood, try putting yourself in the mood by focusing on an idea like this moment is God in disguise. This person is God in disguise. Something like that should help. The last tip is if the Bodhisattva ideal resonates with you from the Mahayana Buddhist perspective, spiritual beings return to the world not out of need, but out of compassion. They choose to endure difficult situations or even embrace suffering, not because they want to, but because it helps other people. It's part of helping others find their way. So if that resonates with you, remind yourself of the Bodhisattva ideal. Offer your presence, offer your love, your compassion, and your help because it helps them, not necessarily because you enjoy it. So that's the talk for this morning. What happens when all we want to talk about is spirituality? Hopefully, you've enjoyed these tips and taken some comfort in knowing that you are not alone. This is definitely a known stage on the path, and you're in good company.